Hey there, welcome to the Game Artist Podcast. My name is Ryan Kingsline. I am the founder of Vertex School, where we train creatives for the career of their lives. In this podcast, we interview amazing creatives to see what makes them tick and see how they got where they are today. So sit back, relax. I look forward to sharing their journey with you. All right, Tim, I have Tim Simpson here with me. Thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. It's a pleasure.
Why don't we start, Tim? Because there's several things that you do, and I've got several people here live with me, environment artists. Start with what you do now.
Awesome. Sure. So I am currently a senior lighting artist at WB, so Warner Brothers, Montreal.
Mhm.
But over the course of my career, I've been a environment artist and a lighting artist, kind of bounced around in that general role. And I decided recently to. So I was working at a company called Took, but I kind of decided to take my own advice and focus on what I really enjoy doing, which is lighting. So I enjoy making environments, but I always enjoyed lighting the most. So I decided to eat my own dog food and go all in on my lighting skill set. Because I mean, I always tell people you gotta focus on what you actually enjoy doing the most, because you're going to be doing it 40 hours a week. So it would be kind of not good if I didn't take my own advice.
So, what is an environment artist? Because that still confuses me, even though I run a school.
Yeah, the role. I mean, it is kind of confusing because the role it really differs across a variety of like studios, right? So
Yeah,
during
exactly.
during my during my time at Ubisoft, I would be what they would call a level artist.
Hmm.
Some studios, usually when I see the words level artist or world builder, you're going to be basically constructing environments, usually 90% of the time using an asset library of stuff that's being outsourced or created by a modeling team. So you're more
Yeah,
building the overall world.
right.
And anytime I see a studio listing a job as an environment artist, I usually assume that I would be doing like a bit of like modeling, maybe some texturing, and more of like a slightly broader skill set. So that's basically what our job is to do, though, is really to fuse the art and design, because a lot of the times we'll be working over a gray block that level designers have already created because it's their job to make the game fun to play, and it's our job to basically interpret that in a way that looks visually appealing to players. So when they're running around a city, it feels like a city and not just a collection of cubes that actually feel good for gameplay.
And by our job, are you referring to lighting artists or environment artists?
Environment artist. So
Okay.
I consider myself both. And then as a lighting artist, it's you're basically taking those environments and all those 3D models and doing your, to the best of your ability to make them look as good as possible. So I always joke that it's my job to make other people's awesome art look as good as possible, as
Mhm.
the end result, right?
Yeah, totally. What do you like about lighting?
For me, it's one of the things is it usually has the biggest impact on the overall final visual image that's on the screen. I always say that no one's ever really going to see your wireframe as someone who's playing a video game usually.
Totally. Yeah. We said that
So
in the boot
it's
camp too.
exactly, and it kind of really even takes that art and design and expands on that further because a lot of the times a really good lighting artist will be able to lead the player through environments or communicate, mood and stuff like that without like bashing it over the player's head. So some of the best examples I've seen of that are games like Uncharted or The Last of Us. They have a really subtle lighting style, but you always know where you're going,
Hmm.
and it still feels realistic without being like, oh, here's a drastically brighter light or something like that to snag your attention. Sometimes you do things like that, but it's a really organic blend of presenting the environments but still leading the player through the path that the designer wants them to go through.
Got it. What got you into this?
Basically, I learned a little bit of 3D in high school. I had the
Uh-huh.
opportunity to pick up 3D Studio Max and start learning that in like grade 9. And there was a bunch of people in my high school that after they graduated were actually getting hired at EA Vancouver out in
Hmm.
Burnaby right out of high school because they knew how to model cars and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I wasn't a fan of the idea of going to college or university. And so I saw this as like, wow, if I can get good enough at this, I don't have to spend a bunch of money to go to university and a bunch of extra years like stuck in a classroom learning about subjects that I'm not super passionate about, just because for a lot of people, that's like the default path, right? So I saw that because it's kind of an opportunity, and I really liked playing video games, and I enjoyed like CG and movies like Jurassic Park and Star Wars and stuff like that. So I was always interested in the digital art scene.
Hmm.
So I basically took that idea and I was like, all right, I'm going to push myself and see if I can get myself into the industry without actually having to go to a post-secondary institution
Yeah.
and spend four years of my life getting a degree. And yeah, so that's basically how I got into it. And I just started working on environments and learning 3D Studio Max and Photoshop and stuff like that, and just gradually started building my skill set over a period of about 6 years before I got into the industry.
Got it. And you teach too, or sort of?
Sort of. I have a YouTube channel called
Hmm.
Polygon Academy,
Yeah.
and I basically started that as a side hustle with the intention to one day, turn it into an actual, hopefully profitable business. But
Hmm.
I always enjoyed the teaching side of things as well, because I say self-taught in air quotes because I mean I don't think anyone is truly self-taught, but like finding online resources and stuff like that. Back in the day, for me, it was really scarce,
Yeah.
and I always had a bunch of unanswered questions, and it was always like pulling teeth to find the right information, the right workflows, stuff like that. So I decided, I mean, if I can, now that I've been in the industry for about 12 years, if I can kind of like reach back and help others get to their goals of breaking into the industry or improving as an artist, it's only going to be win-win, right? Like, so in my spare time, I also kind of consume a lot of entrepreneurial content like Gary Vee and all that stuff, and they're always talking about your personal brand is pretty much the go-to thing these days. So I figured I might as well fuse the entrepreneurial side of things with the artistic side of things. And so far, people have been digging the content I put out because I really want to focus on stuff that is not really spoken about. Like I have art tutorials, but I also have content that is revolves around the ins and outs of the industry, my thoughts on
Hmm.
certain things, and I try and do Q&As and stuff like that, just to give people access to somebody actually in the industry. To get that one-on-one communication with is a really good opportunity that I wish I had when I was learning.
Yeah. I think you've got some lighting presets out of your Gumroad.
Yep.
I think I might be wrong here, but there was some content on trim sheets or something of that nature, or am I wrong?
Yeah, exactly. I did a YouTube. Actually, that's what the four videos that I'm editing right now are on.
Hmm.
It's basically I put out a long video that was an overview of why you should use trim sheets and kind of the whole process of using them to create various assets.
Yeah.
But a lot of people had questions about, oh, how did you actually create that trim texture? So I just broke out it into a four-part series that I'm probably going to put out maybe I think tomorrow if I can finish editing it up tonight. I'm just going
Hmm.
to put out all four videos, and it goes from like planning your trim sheet, sculpting it in ZBrush, baking and texturing it in Painter, and then a bunch of UV tips and tricks. So it should hopefully cover everybody's questions on that subject. So I put out the tutorial series, and then I also put the example assets up on my Gumroad for like $5. And a lot of people have been like downloading those and being able to actually open the models in their own 3D software and play around with the UVs and that trim texture that I like basically gave in that pack.
Hmm.
They were like, oh, all of a sudden it clicks. All these the ways that your model is unwrapped into these strips, you can slide them around and quickly texture things. They're like, oh, now it totally makes sense. So yeah, that's basically what I've put out, along with a bunch of industry advice. But the tutorials by far are the get the most views, and people seem to like them the most. Even though I think some of my mindset videos are probably more important in the long run, just for
Hmm.
people's overall mental health and sanity when trying to get into the industry. But the tutorials, people seem to like the way that I teach the content, which has been really cool seeing that reception. Seeing as I'm pretty introverted, and when I first started the channel, I was like super nervous and I'm like, oh man, I'm putting myself out there on camera, but everyone's been super receptive to it, and it's only led me to wanting to create more content for everyone.
So you're not one of those people that when go to a bar, you go say hi to people and talk and.
Depending how much booze I've had, no, it depends. I mean, I would say I am introverted, and even now, like even after I'm putting out like I don't know 10, 15 videos, it's still
Hmm.
if it's been a while, like I just went on vacation and stuff, firing up the camera to get back on camera and do these new set of tutorials is kind of like, you got to grease the rusty wheel a bit. But I find once you do it, it's more like a muscle, right? The more you
Yeah.
use it, the more comfortable you become. So I mean, anytime I go to a networking event, yeah, at the start of the evening, it's probably like I try and go with a friend, and that's a big piece of advice I give students is like try and go with a fellow student to like something like GDC or E3 if you want, because at least then
Mhm.
you have someone you're comfortable interacting with. And then as either the booze flows or you kind of gain that social momentum talking to other people throughout the night, it becomes easier and easier. But for me, it's not my natural inclination to get on camera and put myself on video now for sure.
Yeah, mine neither. And I just had an interview with Mark Burnett, and it was the same kind of thing. It's like we can do the stuff, but it's like there's a separate part that takes over.
Yeah,
And
for me, it was
yeah,
actually like putting the mission of helping people above my own discomfort,
yeah.
being like, well, I want to build my personal brand, so this is just how media works in 2019 and 20. Like, video is the go-to format, so like,
Mhm.
I have to get over myself and do it. Plus, I realized I had Final Edit, which is like, I don't really do a lot of live streams and stuff like that, so I just edit my videos. I'm like, if I screw up, I'll just edit that out. And then I was like, oh, there's nothing to be afraid of, and if I don't like the video, I won't put it out. So it's that mental shift really helped me.
That's great. So, how has this impacted your career? That's one of the things that I think's kind of been on my mind lately is looking to see how have these things, because as you said, it's started as a side hustle, and as you did it, I'm sure you probably experienced like it's a lot of work. There's a lot,
It's a lot of work, yeah.
yeah, and probably more than you might have anticipated, but there's also a lot of reward as well.
Exactly, exactly.
But the road to turning it into a side hustle can be pretty steep, or it can be a little bit of money here and there, but it still can be steep. The question I got though is how has it impacted the career and you searching for jobs? Because one of the things that I tell my students is that this kind of education marketing, where you are teaching and in teaching marketing yourself, is a powerful tool, but has
Absolutely.
it helped you get jobs or no?
Yeah, totally. So basically, when I first started my ArtStation challenge, the day that I ordered the camera,
Hmm.
I was actually on sabbatical for about a year. I was
Hmm.
just taking some time off. The day that I ordered, I just had literally clicked order on the camera because I was like, oh, I'm not working. I'm gonna vlog this whole ArtStation series. I'm gonna have all the time in the world to do it. It's gonna be awesome. So I clicked order on the camera. Literally half an hour later, my friend Lincoln called me and said, hey, I'm working at Took. We actually need someone to come in for as like an environment slash lighting artist for a while. Would you be interested? And I was like, it sounds fun. So I signed up for that the exact same day. So balancing the two, yeah, it was a little tough. But as soon as I started putting out content, a lot of people, because of just people were sharing it around the industry, so a lot of people in the industry saw it. And
Yeah.
because I was on like say a 3 month contract at Took, by the time that contract was coming to an end, I had multiple job offers on the table just simply because people were approaching me after seeing the content. People were starting to know my name. So, and even today, like just because I'm constantly trying to drip content out there, more and more people see it. So more and more people go and check out your portfolio. And if they're looking to hire, they're like, oh wow, this person can do environments and lighting, and they'll send you feeler emails, right? So
Hmm.
at this point in my career, I would say I probably won't have to go searching for a job unless something goes horrendously wrong at this point,
Hmm.
which is nice. And I try and say that as humbly as possible because I mean it's just attention arbitrage pretty much, right? The more attention you have on your portfolio, once you get to a certain skill level, people are just going to naturally start sending you job offers, which is why I even say to students like if even if you're just starting out, start vlogging and documenting all of your process and work in either written or video format. Because even if you think, oh, I'm not industry quality, why would people watch this? I would totally be interested if someone was like, I want a job at not and do updates. I was like, that would be super interesting. And that person would be on my radar from that day forward. So when they did hit that skill level, it would be like, they're clearly passionate. Let's reach out. We're hiring. Let's give this person a job. It's just having people be aware of you and what you're doing, and media is now the best way to do that.
I think that's one of the big issues a lot of artists face is giving themselves permission to do that. And so that, I mean, that sounds cool, and I 100% agree with you. You have to get yourself out there, but as artists, we live in this kind of we live this dichotomy where you have to get attention, but and I mean, if you see the stuff on YouTube, it's not really like it's not craft centered. Cat videos are still the
Oh,
leader.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
but as an artist, you're judged on the quality of your work, and so we get very focused on whether or not we're good enough. And it's that
Yeah.
phrase right there that kind of dominates our life. It drives us, it makes us better, but it also holds us back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely intimidating to throw your work up. But I mean, for me, my whole mindset of is like, what's the other option? Just to sit there and never get the job of my dreams. Like you're gonna have to put your work out there at some point. And again, that's like a muscle too, right? The more you do it, the more impervious you kind of become to like if someone leaves a jackass comment on your work, like, oh, this sucks. Yeah, the first time that happens, it's gonna hurt, and you're probably gonna sit there and rage and be like, I'm gonna show this person, I'm gonna go through all their social media profiles, uh, and then like for me, when I first put out like my first video, even though
Yeah.
I had been in the industry for a while, I was like, oh, I just know at some point it's going to be like, what is this bald ginger? Who does he think he is? Like, oh, that's way too many polygons, right? And I have seen some comment, not about the bald ginger thing, but like some people like armchair tech directors that are like, well, in my experience, that's way too many polygons. I'm just like, eh. The first one, I was like, who is this person? The second, third time that happened, I was just like, I don't care. I can devote my time and energy into being offended and getting mad, or I could just take that energy and make more content because I know my intentions are a lot better, even if it's not perfect. And
Hmm.
it's to me, intent is everything, right? And if I see that someone's super passionate, but they're not quite there skill wise, I always try and be like, oh man, it clearly shows improvement over your last project. Like keep going, keep going. That's one of the things I always tell people on Twitter and Instagram, like, oh man, just keep going, keep going. Uh, but yeah, getting over that fear of putting out your work there, of your work out there, it's intimidating at first, but the more you do it, the less you kind of give a shit about the trolls and the negative feedback. And a lot of the times, sometimes there is good feedback you'll get by putting your work out there. And yeah, it does suck to have someone be like, "That's pretty good, but I think if you fix these 5 things, your work would improve." And I know for me, that's what helped get me to that industry level of quality because I would just post my work on sites like Polycount and CG Chat back in the day when it still existed and ask for feedback. And yeah, you're going to get torn apart, but dropping that ego and being like, how can I improve this? And you're going to get advice and feedback from people in the industry and they know what they're doing and because they've all made the same mistakes. So they know, they can tell you. And sometimes maybe you apply the feedback, maybe you don't, depending because everyone's like, oh, well, it's intended to be like that. A lot of the time I think that can be an excuse. Like if say you're a character artist and the anatomy is not on point, someone's going to call you out on it, but it's like, oh
Hmm.
no, I just wanted it to be stylized kind of. And it's like, nah, did you? And I mean, it's always the first line of defense, right? Is the ego being like, but I
Hmm.
intended it that way. But for me, if you can post your work and then get feedback and objectively step back and be like, what can I, of these 5 points, what can the 2 or 3 that I can really take to heart? And yeah, it's more work. No one likes to be told go back and fix it. But I mean, at the end of the day, when you're working in a studio, your art director comes and sits down next to you and is like, fix these 3 or 4 things in this environment. And you're like, I thought I was done with it. I want to move on to something new. I guess it's another 3 weeks on this level. Like that's just reality, right? And the quicker you can get yourself in the groove of working like in the reality of applying feedback and not just being told your work is amazing every single time and getting all those nice ass pats, that's probably gonna in the long term really benefit you as an artist, uh, as opposed to just going for the cozy, oh wow, this is so great, this is so great, I love your art. Like that, it does feel good, but that's like to me, that's like almost like junk food, right? It's just easy to sit there in a blanket on your couch consuming, but you're not going to ever achieve anything without getting some of the, I call it being bashed upon the harsh rocks of reality. And every now and then, it's actually good to embrace that.
So if we're an aspiring environment artist, and let's just be generic about it, because we'll say somebody's coming from some college or something where they're just
Yeah,
like, hey, environment art program.
yeah.
Later on they'll learn its levels, its world building, its props, its all of that. But if they're an environment artist, they want a job as an environment artist, and they're like, I'll do realism, but I'll take a job anywhere. What are the biggest mistakes that you've seen people make so far?
The most common one I usually see is the jack of all trades, master of none.
Hmm.
And that's kind of your statement right there was like, I'll take a job anywhere. And I think I see this posted on forums all the time. People asking like, well, I started doing environments, or I started doing characters, but I know there's a lot more opportunity for environments. Should I
Hmm.
switch to environments to get a job? And I'm like, it's clear to me based on all of the five things you have on your art station, you want to be a character artist. Like, keep going with that because it's a completely different skill set. And getting distracted and trying to chase a job is probably the quickest way to lose and not develop an advanced skill set that will actually get you hired. So I say instead of chasing a job and chasing money, chase mastery in what you enjoy. Because if you can get the skill set that you actually really enjoy doing to a really high level, you're going to get hired a lot faster. And by focusing your time and energy on exactly, I want to, let's say someone's like, oh, I want to work on realistic games, but oh, there's a lot of mobile studios that could do stylized work around me that I could get a job there quicker. You're going to be miserable if you actually don't enjoy doing stylized work. So the one of the biggest things I always see is a portfolio that's like one substance shader ball, a prop, some like life drawing, and like maybe one or two small environments or something like that. And I just look at that portfolio and I'm like, I have no idea what to hire this person for, and none of these are at a high enough level that I would want to hire them in the first place. So that sounds brutal because a lot of students that is their first portfolio, right?
It
They
is.
put the first things that they've learned up as their portfolio, and that's totally cool. But as you advance your skill set, audit that old stuff out of your portfolio, so it's more of a consistent, like a coherent, consistent message of exactly what you do and what you're passionate about. So if I'm looking to hire for an environment art position, I open your portfolio, it should bash me over the head like a baseball bat that this person's all about environments. And if you're applying to a studio, the more work you have in their style that's like shows that you could clearly do the day-to-day work, the better chance you'll have of actually getting into that studio. Because I mean, if you look at my portfolio, it's all like photorealistic for the most part, a little bit of sci-fi here and there. I wouldn't go applying to Blizzard and be like, why aren't I getting a job on the Overwatch team? I don't have any stylized artwork in my portfolio. Like it
Mhm.
wouldn't make sense, right? Like I would have probably a better chance if you look at, oh, this guy's worked on Watch Dogs, this guy's worked on Space Marine. Okay, maybe I could go work on Gears of War or like Grand Theft Auto or something like that. You know what I mean? It's just the relevance is so important. Um,
Do you think that one model, one project can get you a job, or do we need to have multiple projects?
I would say as a macro, you should have multiple projects, but in my experience, in the micro, it will be one project that gets you the most attention, that gets you the job, right? So say you have a portfolio of four or five different little environments you've built over the last few years. Your new environment that you post is probably going to be the one that gets you all the attention, that will get recruiters hitting you up because it's probably going to be the best quality. So in that sense, you're always like, I like to say, one project away from your dream job, because
Mhm.
if you put out a really high quality project, that's going to be great. But people will also look at all of the rest of your work too, right? A lot of the times, I would say just having one project in your portfolio, it isn't going to give people enough context. Like, is this just a one-off? Like, how long did it take them to do this? If they only have one project and they've been in school for 3 years, like, did this take them 3 years to do? So I would say on a minimum, I would probably want to see three or four like really good strong pieces, but you don't need like 10 pieces in your portfolio. Like if you look at my portfolio, yeah, there's I don't know, like 10 or some different things, but I've been working in the industry for 12 years. And even some of this older work I should probably audit out. Like if I was going on an extreme job hunt, I would probably audit out my SOCOM stuff and those lighting paint overs I have down at the bottom. But for me, I leave that up as I'm building my personal brand. So it helps when students can see the kind of the progression of where I've come from. So that's why I leave up some of my older work. But if I was like really wanting to get a job at like a super high end studio, like I don't know, Naughty Dog or Sony Santa Monica or something like that, I would
Mhm.
audit that old stuff out of there and be like, for the next 2 weeks while I'm applying, I've pruned my portfolio down to the best work that I have. But yeah, so long story short,
Yeah.
you definitely need a few pieces to show that you can consistently, swing and hit that quality bar.
There's a question in the community. What about shader balls, substance balls?
They're good. They get a lot of likes on ArtStation.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely like seeing them. And if you want to build environments, yeah, being really good in Substance, it's like any skill that you can show that you've gotten to a high level of is just like another like charisma point to your character if this is an RPG, right? So if your materials are really good, yeah, that's awesome. But if it's like a mishmash, like I said, if it's like the first brick texture you made in Substance, that's not really going to wow most people because everyone's done the brick texture tutorial, right? But if you've developed that skill set over a long period of time, yeah, put them in your portfolio. But a lot of the time, studios have dedicated materials artists nowadays. So if you want to apply as a level artist at Ubisoft, you're not going to be making materials. So there's no point in having it in your portfolio, right? Um, if but anything like I said, anything that's developed to a high level, if they're really good, it's not going to harm you. But if it's clear that it's the first time you did it, I would axe it.
Got
But
it.
if you want to be a materials artist, like a dedicated,
Got
but
it.
if you want to just in substance all day, like
Yeah.
there's some amazing portfolios out there, like Daniel Tiger, Josh Lynch, those guys. You look at their entire portfolio is shader ball madness, and it's awesome. But they're demonstrating that they've mastered that skill set because that's what they do on a daily basis.
Hmm. Got it. It. I think this is what we're really getting to. You said earlier, which is demonstrate an advanced skill set that's going to make you more likely to get a job. Whereas you also said chasing mastery. And
Yeah,
one of the ways that I like to think about this is that there's a certain threshold. It's almost like the uncanny valley. It's like in this industry, there's a point at which like it doesn't matter how much you know, it doesn't matter, your networking necessarily. It's just there's this threshold where your work is, mm, and then your work is great. Let's get you in.
exactly.
Let's
Yeah,
bring you. You're ready, right? And this phase is like, it's a big phase. So the
yeah.
question,
Like for me, it was 6 years. I always I try and say that as much as possible because
yeah.
I find that right now nowadays is the age of entitlement and the age of like instant gratification, right?
Hmm.
So it's like people just need that context, and I try. So that's why I try and say it is. But yeah, it took me 6 years from the day I opened 3ds Max from the first time till I got my first junior artist job, and 5 of those years I would say developing my skills, and then that last year, I had felt like confident enough in my skills to really start creating new portfolio work and throwing out the old stuff. And then I was, that tip exactly you said that tipping point.
Yeah. What what I'm kind of I like to be a student of what defines the edge of that tipping point. And so one of the things we do in the boot camps, we talk about triggers, and in our case, we focus on hiring triggers. And like what's going to tell somebody I'm a professional? What's going to tell them I'm an amateur, right? So in your view, let's take a look. I kind of want to dive into lighting. Like if you're looking at
Yeah.
lighting, what tells you that somebody knows what they're doing, and what tells you that they're still in their phase?
For me, like when it comes to lighting, a lot of it is are they using their light to imply maybe some gameplay? Is the color palette kind of like if you look at a lot of my images, I usually use like a two-tone color palette. I don't use like a Christmas light color palette, and that's
Mhm.
I think one of the signs of an beginner lighting artist or someone who's lighting their first environments is they'll kind of just throw lights around, maybe a bunch of different colors, and with no real intention of where to guide the eye and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Because lighting really drives composition. So if you look at those two images on screen right now, your eye instantly goes on the top one to that center alleyway further down. So you're like, I want to travel further down that alleyway because that's one of the brightest parts of the screen. And then in the image below, oh hey, there's a bright doorway there. Like clearly that's somewhere you can go. And then the orange adds like an accent color to just add some spice to the environment. But by keeping a restrained, it's almost like the more restraint you have, the better your lighting will usually look. Instead of placing a million lights, I try and place as few lights as possible while still communicating those key concepts.
What does
And then,
what does as few lights as possible mean? Because I find when I talk to environment artists, it doesn't mean three; it means more.
yeah,
Um,
well, I mean, in terms of light sources.
Hmm.
So like I like to have one strong key light usually, one
Yeah.
or two strong like key sources of light, and then maybe just a few different sources of fill light.
Hmm.
But a lot of times when I look at like say beginner sci-fi hallways, they have like a million little tiny point lights everywhere and like a
Right.
million little light sources, but no clearly defined key light. Something at like the end of the hallway, like shining down, or maybe a window with a light coming in, something like that. They're like, oh, it's a sci-fi space station. There would just be like little maintenance lights everywhere, and that's how I'm going to add little like hundreds of little point lights inside of Unreal, and it looks really spotty. And there's no thought of how is the composition being affected, or more importantly, how is the mood and storytelling being affected, and how am I guiding the viewer through that image?
That's something I hear a lot from artists is the idea of story. Like we had Christopher Ratsby in, and he was talking about how important story is and being involved in that because you're an environment artist. You're going to be you're creating this world that people are walking around and gameplay is a big part of what you do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So how what are some of the exercises or some of the ways to think about this that you might give students because they're at the beginning, they don't quite get gameplay yet. How can I think about story, or even yet with this image, this Hong Kong alley, like how are you thinking about story here?
So for me, like I was really inspired by I think it was what's his name? Oh God, Liam Wong's photography,
Hmm.
and I just watched John Wick. So for me, this was a study in not really necessarily story, but mood, how I want the person to feel when they watch this or look at this image, and I wanted it to feel like kind of grimy and really like artificially lit with these neon lights and just like that uncomfortable mood. And so a lot of the times, yeah, storytelling is great, like how you arrange your props and you can make up little stories and stuff like that. But I really the the story is just a means of making people feel something, right? So a lot of the times I'll look at the color palette of something and I'm like, how does this make me feel? Like, is this like a lot of say horror movies? They have a really desaturated, high contrast kind of image on the screen, because they want to make you feel uncomfortable, or it's often color graded in a really sickly color palette that just makes you feel uneasy, right? Versus like looking at a Pixar movie. Those guys are masters of color as well. Pixar is like how they use color and light to make you feel something. So in that case, if you look at a movie like Up or something like that, the color palette is crazy intense, but they're always making you feel like either really sad in the beginning, or really like a sense of adventure by using bright colors and stuff like that. So for me, color and light intensity and just the overall feeling of an image is just as important as, oh, this little collection of pots on the table. It was a mage that was working here. Like a lot of the times that is, especially during gameplay, you can imply a lot of stuff, but a lot of people go overboard being like, oh, the little scratches on this table when he moved his ink quill. I'm like, I'm never seeing that. Like, just jumble a bunch of like potions and stuff. Okay, it's a mage's workshop, right? So it's balancing that for me.
Mm,
But the overall image is like, how does it make me feel when I look at it emotionally?
got it. There's a question Alberto's asking about. Um, I mean, I know some of the answer to this, but I'm going to just take his words for it and then we'll go from there.
Yeah,
When
for
you
sure.
block out an environment, I see you create a base model of the main elements. I was wondering, you block out the entire environment with those elements and then you create the real assets for it. If so, you basically have to create the scene again and just replace those basic assets. And so I see this question in a couple of different ways. One is just the process of white boxing or gray boxing your environment,
Yeah.
and then two, I think the other thing that kind of especially since we're looking at the scene is where do students have permission to buy assets and include outside assets, and where is it that they should really just be modeling everything themselves? Because I find students tend to have like an Alaska mentality. I'm gonna build my log
Yeah.
cabin
Okay.
myself.
Definitely. Awesome. Okay, let's run with this. So, yeah, just a quick clarification. I didn't actually make this Hong Kong alleyway scene. I bought it on the marketplace and did a relighting on it because
Hmm.
it was strictly for me an exercise in improving my lighting skills. But to go back to the first part, when I block out an entire environment, yeah, I modeled the placeholder pieces in Max, and then I make sure I keep the pivots the same. and the name's the same. So I just, once I've created the final art asset to say replace like a modular wall piece, I just in Max basically overwrite the existing gray blocks placeholder, re-export it, and re-import it into Unreal. And if I've done things correctly, because the pivots are the same and the names are the same, it like bloop updates in place in the world. I don't have to replace it or anything like that. So that makes your life easy. If you set up your pivots on a grid and stuff like that, it's going to make just swapping your assets, even if you come bring it in with a different name, but the pivots are the same, you can just right click and swap and stuff like that. So keeping your pivots and naming conventions and preparing that by planning for it in the beginning is a great way to save a lot of time, because then you don't have to, like you said, recreate your entire scene. And onto the bigger thing of using asset packs and stuff like that. So if, for example, you want to be a level artist, I see no issue in combining, asset packs you've bought from marketplaces and stuff like that, because your day-to-day duties aren't going to be modeling. If you know the exact studio you want to work at, and you've done your research, and okay, a level artist, you can contact a level artist that works at that studio. Do you guys model? Nope. Okay, cool. You can compose scenes. And as long as you say in the description, like, this scene was created with marketplace assets, blah, 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 and you don't try and front like you've done it all by yourself, that's fine. Like, I would totally hire someone, because the level art skill set is less about, modeling tiny details and more about composition, layout, being able to compose a nice scene in terms of balance of details. So in that case, if that's the skill set you want to demonstrate, go ahead and use marketplace assets. Like, there's a ton of great content that Epic has put out for free that you can use to build scenes. And I mean, level designers can do that too, right? If you want to be a level designer, you can either use gray blocks, or you can actually just use marketplace assets and be like, here, I can clearly create convincing spaces that would work in a gameplay perspective, and focus more on communicating the exact gameplay that would happen in that space if you want to be on the more the design side of things. So I think it's totally fine. Like, more and more you're seeing people using Megascans in their personal work, because at a certain point, sitting down and like creating a rock texture, or a rock model, and doing like one of those million rock models that's on ArtStation, is a lot less of a time trade-off than if you want to be composing scenes and world building. Like, don't spend your time sculpting rocks, because all that stuff's going to usually get outsourced. Like, props and stuff like that is usually outsourced nowadays. So if you want to work in-house at a studio, I would say focus on the things that have a bigger impact on the overall game and player experience. So the gameplay and the player experience, which nowadays is level art, level design. But if you want to be a vehicle or weapon modeler, don't go buying weapons on the marketplace and like kit bashing them together and being, I'm done. Like, show that you can fully create interesting weapons from scratch, right? So it's all about the relevant skill set to the job that you want to do.
Yeah, and I guess that's the tough part, is getting some clarity there. When did you know that environment was your thing, as opposed to props or anything like that?
Pretty much right off the bat. Not right off the bat, because when I first started learning 3D Studio Max, I tried a bit of everything, right? Like, I tried modeling characters, I tried modeling cars, but as I did that process for the first like couple years in high school, just basically learning the tools with different projects or whatever interested me, I found myself going back more towards like creating maps for Counter-Strike, and I was always into like really interesting architectural, like anytime I would see some really cool shots in a movie, or photos of architecture, I was always like, wow, this is super interesting. This is what gets me fired up. So after a while, I decided to focus on that. So I always tell people, taste everything. Like, you never know what you're into usually. Some people do right away. They're like, I want to make monsters. That's the only thing I think about, is making monsters. In that case, why would they waste their time learning environment stuff if it's not what they're passionate about? But I usually say taste everything, because you never know right off the bat what you're going to be really into, but you'll usually, by tasting everything, you'll find one or two things that you love, and you'll just naturally start doing those over and over again. And then you're like, okay, I guess I'm meant to be an environment artist. So yeah, I mean, if you want to be a freelance 3D artist, go ahead and like create some badass props, because like I said, a lot of props and stuff nowadays get outsourced. That doesn't necessarily mean outsourced to China or India. I mean, that is where a lot of that happens, but there are outsourcing studios here in Montreal where people are making characters, props, weapons, all that kind of stuff. So it just comes down to doing what you really enjoy doing.
this is, and I think this is kind of one of the, I mean, at least for me, it's one of the core dilemmas I try to solve because it's about doing what you enjoy doing, but at a certain point, it's also about, look, I want to move out of my parents' house. They kind of gave me an ultimatum. How do I make this happen? And I always tell people, that look, if your sole focus is a job, you need to look at programming because in programming there's going to be like a million unmet jobs by
Well, I mean, if your sole focus is money, like
yeah,
go and become like a financial analyst or something like
yeah,
that.
dude, I
Like
live in Orange County,
you
so
can make a lot more money doing a lot different. I mean, even like probably an electrician or a plumber or something like that, right? Like it's depending on the job market. Like
yeah.
yeah, you can make a decent wage in games, but I mean, that's probably lower down my priority stack, right? But
Hmm.
yeah, if you're like, I absolutely need to get a job, I would reverse engineer. Okay, what are the opportunities that I have presented to myself? I would use something like Game Dev Map to look at the studios around you, look at
Yeah.
the games that they're putting out, find one that like really resonates with you, and basically just try and show that you have the ability to create whatever they're working on. And then to be honest, like I see this a lot of the time. People are like, but I'm in China and I'm in India or I'm in Brazil, and I need to get a work visa to come to the States. And yeah, I mean
Hmm.
that's often a tough reality to deal with, right? In which case, if you're in China or India, maybe look at and see, like, use again Game Dev Map. There's plenty of outsourcing studios, right? Look at their, because now most outsourcing studios have their portfolios on ArtStation, so that gives you an idea of the quality that they're putting out and the types of games that they work on. So you can kind of reverse engineer it, right, and be like, all right, I'm picking my target. This is clearly the content that the opportunities around me are requiring artists to make. How
Yeah.
can I get good at making that as possible? So it's, man, yeah, it's just all about reverse engineering and seeing how you can create opportunity for yourself by developing a highly relevant skill set to the studios that are either around you or you really want to work at, right? And I
Uh,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, it does suck that some people will have to get a degree to get a work visa, but I mean, those are the rules set up by those countries, right? So for me, I'm always about like know the rules of the matrix and play within it as best you can. Because
Hmm.
I mean, you can sit there pouting all day and be like, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to get a degree. I just want to teach myself, but I also want to work in the States. But I'm like located in some country where, in order to come to the States, they need a work visa. But I just want to get really good, and they'll be able to bring me aboard. And while the studio might really want to bring you aboard, the government's going to be like, no, these are our rules. So I mean, just deal with the harshness of reality in the best way you can, and figure out a way to reverse engineer and create an opportunity for yourself.
I like that. Yeah, that's a big part of what that's actually been a big part of my life the last 3 years is focusing on the reverse engineer process. Know where you want to go. So one of the things we tell people is know what studio you want to work at, because otherwise
Yeah,
you have no clue. You have to have a North Star.
exactly. Instead of hunting with like a shotgun, hunt with a sniper rifle. Like
Yeah.
that comes down to the jack of all trades, master of none. That's like master of none. That's like blasting away into the sky with a shotgun, hoping a bird will fall at your feet. Versus like yeah, maybe taking more time to get that defined skill set. But that's like setting up your blind. Along comes a deer. You have a rifle. Boom. This like one shot. Bam. It just clearly makes sense, right?
I love that. Yeah, it's perfect. And I think in this industry, that's one of the most important messages that, I spend my time trying to tell people is you have to focus because this industry doesn't care until they care, until you connect
Exactly.
with them, and you, because, it's like, we're dealing with artists and all of us, like I myself include, like I oil paint, I do all these things and, I have my own ideas of what good is and whatnot, but this industry doesn't, like these studios, they don't care what my idea of good is, you know? Can
Exactly.
you?
It's a business relationship, right? Like
Yeah.
they have a position they need to fill. There's requirements for that position,
Hmm.
and they have a clear set of like expectations based on their needs for the project. Okay,
Yep.
okay, we need two environment artists. We're building an open world game. Blah 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 stuff like that, right? So it's on you to demonstrate that you can clearly do the job of an environment artist or a character artist, and just show that you're as relevant as possible to what they're looking to fill that position with. And I mean, they're going to get a ton of applicants, and most of them aren't going to be relevant because it's going to be, you know, generalists or stuff like that applying, but they're literally like, we are hiring an environment artist. So it doesn't matter if you have a wide range of stuff in your portfolio, some characters, they're like, that is totally irrelevant to this job that we're looking to pay you to do.
Hmm.
So they want to see you, the skills that they're going to specifically pay you to do, be at a high level. But to also to kind of jump back onto that, I want to move out of my parents' basement. How do I get money coming in? Nowadays with the internet, like there's a whole subculture of people making money on Gumroad, the Unreal Marketplace. So say you are in a country where you really need a visa to come work in the United States, maybe you could actually, instead of going and working for a studio, you could create some super useful asset packs, put them on the Unreal Marketplace, learn digital marketing, so like running
Mm.
Facebook ads, stuff like that, and you
Yeah.
could probably make a decent income doing that, right? So it's thinking outside the box. It's like, how can I use the skills that I've built to generate an income? So for me, yeah, I'm building educational content, but if I wanted to also create another stream of income, I would probably look what big games are coming up. Okay, Cyberpunk. So probably Cyberpunk themed asset packs are going to be really popular on the Unreal Marketplace and Unity Marketplace in the next
Yes.
24 months, because everyone's going to sit down and play Cyberpunk and be like, I want to make an indie Cyberpunk game. So I'm thinking like that. It's like, think outside the box, right? See where the market trends are going and be like, there's going to be a bunch of people hungry for battle royale assets or cosmetic assets. I'm going to create a bunch of those and see if I can create an income like that. So it's, again, your situation can, sometimes those pressures can force you to think outside the box, and you can actually have happy accidents happen along the way.
I love that. And sounds to me like to you, it's important for artists to be entrepreneurial.
I absolutely, I think so. I mean, everyone has their own level of, like, I would say a business blend and an art blend, right? Like some
Hmm.
people are 100% artists. They're like, I'm a purist, like taking money from my art. Like, although nowadays you're hard to find people like that, but like some people are just like, I just want to make art, get paid for this. And some people are like, I want to make a big business that's art related, right? So some people are a different blend of entrepreneur and artist.
Hmm.
And but nowadays, I think the more you can kind of steal ideas from both. Like I think entrepreneurs can, you know, actually benefit from either hiring artists or learning art skills themselves to make more aesthetically pleasing ads and media and stuff like that, right? So it's, if you're an artist and then you can learn a little bit about like I don't know, content marketing, or like, you know, how to do things like SEO on YouTube and stuff like that, so more people see your work, you're as a result, you will probably make more money in the long run.
Hmm. Did you study somewhere, or how'd you get started? Because your camera quality is great. You're great on camera. Your
It
content's
was it was all YouTube research. Like it
yeah.
was YouTube research and just watching what not necessarily other people in my niche, like what tutorials people were doing, but
Hmm.
just looking at my favorite YouTubers. So like Peter McKinnon, Gary Vee. I'm just like, just do what they're doing, or take what things you like about their videos. So yeah, like nice background music, like a good camera with a decent lens. Obviously, that's an investment. But the better, higher quality I can make my content in comparison to the other people doing it in my niche, like the more I'll stand out, right?
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons why I really decided to show my face, because I found so many tutorials on YouTube are just like some echoey mic in a basement, and it's like, okay, today we make car, and where's the buttons to click this, and it's like an hour long video of someone kind of scrambling and rambling, and like no clear presentation of what they're doing, or they don't convey the information in a clear way that's easy to remember the workflow.
Hmm.
They just sit down and maybe just make something, but they can't explain why they're doing it. And for me, a lot of my videos, I find the most important part is more of like the mindset and the why behind I'm doing something, versus like, here's the button, here's the chamfer button, here's the connect button. It's like, no, this is why you want to connect this edge loop. This is why you would want to use a trim sheet, right? That's the super important part, where, because anyone can show you how to model like a car or a tire, but it's the why behind it of like, what, this is why we do it in the game industry, is super, super important.
Hmm.
But yeah, I knew right off the bat I would have to show my face, and that was going to make my content more effective. Because I want, when I make a video, I want it to literally put people at ease and feel like that we're hanging out, and I'm just sitting there next to you, talking to you, showing you Max. Because I mean, that's
Yeah.
all the mentors I've had in the industry. It's like, oh, hey, can I sit down at your desk for a moment? I'll show you this thing. And so I wanted it to feel like that, because I mean, it makes it a lot easier to connect with the person who's teaching, and which probably makes it easier to retain the content. And it'll probably make people want to come back to my content more if they recognize me in the thumbnails, all that stuff, all that kind of mindset of, again, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of soft skills, stuff like that.
I want to talk about this work that's on the screen right now, but before we do that, I think if it might be worthwhile, if you could tell me or talk to us about like that first time when you turned the camera on and like, did everything go the way you expected? Did you just like start talking and be like, hey, I'm totally
Okay,
cool with
so
this?
I initially turned a camera on about 6 months before that while I was on sabbatical.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I know I need to start creating content. I have all the time in the world because I have, every day off work and I'm sitting here playing video games, not getting anything done. So I was using my iPhone and I literally sat down and wrote out like a 5-page script
Hmm.
and was like trying to do it all in one take and just screwing up over and over and over. And eventually I
So
was like, screw
painful.
this. Like this is atrociously painful. I quit. And I was like, that's it. I'm just gonna write articles or something like that.
Hmm.
But then I was like, no, okay, I got to get the hang on this video thing. And then I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna sit down. I make some notes. I made some notes on like the things I wanted to cover, so I wouldn't just go rambling on tangents. But then
Yeah.
I just sat down and just started speaking. And anytime I would screw up, I would just like clap my hands to have a marker where I wanted to cut. And again,
Hmm.
that came down with knowing I had Final Cut. And I'm like, man, everyone's YouTube videos, there's no one's doing a seamless take. It's all edited. In fact, that's part of like the charm of most YouTubers is that hyperactive like jump cut editing anyways. So I'm like,
Hmm.
it, that getting rid of that perfection mindset was something that really helped me. I was like, I'm just going to get started. I'm going to make a video, put it out, and I don't like give a shit if like 5 people watch it, because the sense of accomplishment of actually doing something and more importantly finishing it was huge, and that gave me a huge boost of momentum that kind of kept me going, because I put out one piece of content and people were like, "Hey, what's this? Oh, this is a cool idea," and then it just the momentum grew, right?
Right.
But it was, yeah, just sit down, bang it out, and if you don't like it, don't use it. But I mean, chances are it's going to turn out better than you expected. In my case, I was like, yeah, this is pretty good, I guess. I'll put it up, see what people think.
So you
And
don't like
again,
to work
it's
from
YouTube. You can
script?
always delete it.
Yeah,
Uh,
totally.
I work from notes, because if I find if I try and work from a script, I sound unnatural, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have that hangout kind of vibe to it. It's like it feels more like okay. It just if for me it feels awkward. For some people it really works well because they can communicate, like a lot of those like essay channels on YouTube where they have a really well done essay on like breaking down a certain thing about film, or like an essay on Breaking Bad where they
Hmm.
have accompanying visuals. Like
Yeah.
it's to the word a script, but they know how to deliver it really well. That's just not my jam, right? Like so for me it was using a bit of self awareness to be like, what is the content that I can feel comfortable making, and more importantly, actually get out the door. And
Hmm.
sitting down to do a script is clearly drove me into an insane level of rage. Like I wish I had the video of me just being like swearing and being like, "Oh man, this is like screw this." So it's just using a bit of self awareness, because everyone should create content that aligns with like themselves, right? Like I could try and be Casey Neistat or Peter McKinnon, but at the end of the day, that's going to feel awkward and forced, just being rather than just being myself. And like, yeah, sure, maybe millions of people aren't going to watch it, but by being myself, I'm going to cultivate a core audience of people that genuinely like my content because it's the stuff that I enjoy putting out rather than trying to force it and be someone else.
That's awesome. I actually threw away my teleprompter a year ago and I used it, I think, twice. And it was infuriating
Yeah.
each one of the, I cannot work with scripts.
People like to see like the real people,
Yeah.
like that's, I mean, that's part of Gary Vee says that all the time. He's like, man, just make like your content doesn't have to be pristine and perfect. He's like, do like a little ghetto Instagram story, and people actually like seeing big celebrities have more down to earth content. Like a lot of The Rock's Instagram, it's just him filming as himself. Like, and then you look at say something like that versus maybe Will Smith's YouTube channel where all of his vlogs are like hyper produced. That's his style, right? The Rock is super likable, and I think he achieves that a lot by being seemingly down to earth, right? Here's
Hmm.
like a non-perfect selfie. Here's like he has great pictures that he posts on his Instagram, but then every like 5 or 10 will just be like some little throwaway like click. See, I'm a human being too, right? Like it's people like to see behind that perfect facade for almost everyone, because no one is perfect, right? And a lot of times, even like looking at other artists' work on ArtStation, yeah, people usually post their best work, but for every project you see that is finished, there's probably 3 or 4 that is like left on the ground on the cutting room floor that no one will ever see. But you don't see people's failures for the most part. So for me, I might see if I can dig up some of my older models and actually do a video showing those to be like, look, this is like where I was at in high school. I think I have like an old Raptor model or something like a Velociraptor. I'll see if I can find it just to show that realness, right? Where it's like, man, everyone starts from zero. Everyone starts like not perfect. And I think that kind of content, especially in like the Instagram age now, where it's all like, here's the perfect booty shot, here's the perfect flex in the mirror. Like people just
Yep.
want to see some actual real stuff every now and then too, right?
Yeah. Do you think about duration? Like, do you try to keep them at 30 or an hour or 15, or do you worry
Oh
about that?
man, I'm terrible at duration. Like my
Mm,
average watch time. So if we can go to the analytics, so my average
hmm.
watch time is like 6 minutes, 6.5 minutes or something like that. So that means
Yeah.
on average, when someone comes to one of my videos, they watch about 6 minutes. But I know
Hmm.
my hardcore fan base watches every second of it, right? So I'm not too concerned about that because I want to convey what I'm trying to teach in the shortest amount of time possible. Again, going back to that example of like the 2.5 hour unedited tutorial of someone in their basement with an echoing mic. Like I never want it to be that. There's like usually 3 or 4 things I want to teach in the video. And the raw cuts are probably usually, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours. And then I try and edit it down. It usually ends up being about half an hour. It would probably be better. Like this new series, I was like, okay, I'm going to make it 4 videos that are like 10, 15 minutes each. That
Hmm.
didn't happen. It's like they're all like 15, 20 minutes. But I mean, YouTube is great for long form content like that. But I would never,
Hmm.
at first I put those videos on Facebook as well as like native Facebook uploads, but no one was watching a 30-minute video on Facebook. Like I would
Yeah.
take slices of those bigger videos and maybe edit them up into like 1 or 2 minute videos for Facebook and then like a
Mhm.
30-second thing for Instagram, right? So I
Yeah.
try and make micro content out of my big content because that just gives you more things to use on different platforms, and that way you can build your audience across a bunch of different platforms.
That
But
makes
it's,
sense
it's knowing
because,
knowing like people on Twitter, they're not there to watch like an hour long tutorial. They're there
yeah.
for like a 30-second, if that, like little clip or a little 2 second sentence. It's like, oh, artists, you can do it. Like that's cool. And then on Instagram, they want to see cool pictures and maybe like a 20-second video. And then Facebook, maybe they'll watch something with captions on. While they're on the bus for like 3 minutes. So it's knowing how people interact on those platforms has really kind of influenced the content that I put out. But that's
Hmm.
why I think my audience is biggest on YouTube because I naturally go more towards the long form content, and that's
Yeah,
where people go to learn anyways.
that makes sense. Yeah, it's totally the place to learn.
Yeah.
It's interesting too because one of my friends, Marshall Vandriff, was talking. We were talking a while back, and he actually writes scripts for Proco, um, where the whole thing is written out. He figures the whole thing out. They get it all figured out, and they just do that video.
Yeah.
That take right there while you're staring at it. So it works. Everything. Different things work for different people.
Yeah. Like for me, trying to memorize a script, it would destroy my brain. But some people
Yeah.
like that they can just do it. They can read something and be like, boom, deliver it on one take and just rock it out. But for me, like if I tried to do that, I'd want to blow my brains out because I would just get super frustrated.
I want to get technical here, and if we're looking at you're seeing the
Yep, the
ArtStation. This is
Feudal
the
Japan one.
ArtStation challenge, right? Yeah, something
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. That's like the scene that I made the first set of videos for.
Great. So when I'm looking at this, all right, and this is one of the things that's really hard, I think, for environment artists. Like I feel for environment artists, because at my heart, I'm a character guy, and I
Yeah.
studied anatomy, and and I understand the lay of the land there. But environment arts is so huge, so massive. And so if I'm looking at this, and in the back of my mind as I'm asking this question, I'm thinking of Victor Oman. You know
Oh
Victor.
yeah. Everybody
And
knows Victor. He's
yeah,
awesome.
so he was just in on the podcast last week, and we
Oh,
were
sick.
talking about his I called it his Desert Storm, but he's that one scene, and what
Oh,
was it?
the Counter
Desert
Strike scene.
Strike, Counter Strike scene.
Yeah, D Dust. Yeah.
There you go. So
Yeah.
I'm looking at that. I'm looking at his, bathroom scene. I'm looking at what you got here. And I know that there are environment artists out there that are hustling to create every crack, every piece of this. And the question I really would love for you to answer for my environment guys and gals is, where are they wasting their time? Like, what is it that they might be thinking they need to do that is just a waste of their life and they need to stop doing it?
Yeah, so like one of my biggest points when dealing with environments is as much as you can look at the macro. So like if you look at this screenshot, I'm not like sitting there focusing on adding little tiny drips on those little stone statues with like the square hole in the side, like underneath that rim, and like hand painting like little edge scratches and stuff. I just literally threw a stone smart material on that, added like a grunge layer and with a smart mask, and was like, that's pretty much good enough. Like if you look at that image and squint your eyes, you're never going to see any of that detail, right? I have the analogy of like the person that's modeling a trash can, and then like say there's a bunch of bolts along the base of it. They're hand rotating every bolt to be at a slightly different 15-degree angle, and
Mhm.
like slightly changing everything up. I'm like, in say you're playing Call of Duty, when is the last time, unless you're an environment artist, when is the last time you ever stopped to look at the bolts on like a wall panel? It's like you're too busy running around blasting. You just want the all the materials. They look great. Everything looks awesome in motion. That's usually why I build my scenes with the third person blueprint
Mhm.
inside of Unreal, because then I can just run around and I can actually have the camera moving all the time and be like, okay, is this feeling good? Do things feel like they have weight? I don't get stuck in the tiny little details. Like you can go back and polish afterwards, but a lot of the times, like when I was building the scene, I would get things to the minimum level of quality using like smart materials, just throw on a couple smart masks. I'm not sitting there hand painting the edgeware. Like if I wanted to polish it after the entire scene has been assembled, absolutely go back and do that. But like if you're spending all of your time on props at the beginning when you have an entire scene to do, like it's easy to mismanage your time, right? Like so say I built those little like stone lantern things in
Mhm.
maybe a few hours, right? So I treated that like if I treated that like a hero prop and spent like 3 days on that, I would have never finished this art station challenge,
Mhm.
especially because I knew I had to spend time creating videos and editing, right? So I was like, how can I efficiently that's why I kept my scene small, first of all, but with a bunch of reused assets. And that's a big tip I have for aspiring environment artists is like do the most you can with the least amount of possible, if that makes sense. So like everything was modular. If you scroll down all the way to the bottom, I think there's a shot of all of the assets I used to build that screen. So it's one, yeah, I think it's at the very bottom. So those are literally the entire assets that I made for that entire scene.
Mhm.
So it's and even a lot of those are just like reduplicated pieces of each other. So I mean, it's working smarter, not harder, right? But really, I find getting lost in the tiny details at first is where so many people lose their time. They worry about like when the player walks up to this wall, are they going to see this slightly different crack? Are they going to notice it's the same crack as that pillar over there? It's like no one is ever going to think about that. So just have one really good looking pillar, get it in as fast as possible, and work at the macro level, and then it'll quickly become apparent what needs polish because something will stand out as like not looking as good as everything else. Or also a lot of the time, once lighting gets in there, maybe a bunch of the assets that you spent all your time doing are now completely in shadow, right? So
Mhm.
it's why I always recommend working in phases. Like block it out, add a first pass lighting, work on your largest assets that take up the most screen space first. I know for a lot of the time that's like structural geometry, which tends to be fairly simple and not the most exciting stuff to make. Like one of the biggest mistakes I always see students doing is they'll show a concept. They're like, I'm making this concept of this dope like sci-fi alley or a cyberpunk alley, and they'll be like, I'm working on the dumpster first. And I'm just like, oh man, like block in your scene, like get the buildings in place with like first pass
Yeah.
textures, and then like proxy out all of your props. But because
Mhm.
everyone wants to get to like the good looking stuff first, right? Where it's like, I want to do all the grunge on that dumpster. And I mean, that's great, but that's the quickest way to lose steam because you'll spend 7 days on that dumpster, and then you'll put it in your scene and you'll zoom out and you'll see everything else left to do, and you'll just be like, oh my god, this is going to take me like 7 months to finish this entire scene, versus
Mhm.
like doing a quick pass on all the large forms first, which gives you the biggest bang for your buck. And then you're like, wow, 80% of the screen is already filled with art. Now I can spend time making my props, and I can actually cut props if I want to finish the scene faster. I can maybe cut that second variation of that wood palette. Like it just by working from big to small, it allows you to get your scene to an alpha state where you can, walk away as quickly as possible. Because like a lot of the times during a game production, they'll give you an area to work on, and you'll have a set time limit to work on it, right? So if I
Hmm.
focus on one little corner, adding all of this detail, placing all these props and stuff for like 2 weeks, and I had 3 weeks to do like a 2 city block kind of space of the game, the rest of the area isn't gonna look as good if I can even finish it, right? And that's where juniors kind of mismanage their time, and a senior artist will probably have to get put on that area to help them out. That's natural; it happens, and like no one's gonna fire you for that or anything like that. But it's just learning where to put your priorities on what has the biggest visual impact.
Hmm. Some of that, I think, gets right up to the question Sari had. And Sari was asking, does size matter when creating an environment? She says she sees these grand environments, she gets intimidated, and she worries that, small environments that she makes, aren't going to be good enough.
Uh, Absolutely not. I would say if you're starting out, it's better to start small. I'm gonna pull up ArtStation here, and I'll send you. I'll tell you some, or I'll post a
A link?
yeah, I'll post a link because I've seen a bunch of like little scenes that are like literally the two corners of a building with like a little piece of sidewalk that are awesome. It's clearly manageable to be done. And if you're intimidated by a massive scene, start small because it's the quality we want to see, right? Like if you can make one really good looking building, chances are you can make 10 really good looking buildings. But
Yeah.
trying to do like an entire open world city right off the bat it's gonna burn you out and gonna be really intimidating. So I'll post a couple links here. Uh, I always add like this teaching examples anytime I see it because I've saved examples of things just like that because I always want to tell students like you can get a lot done. Where are we here? So I'll post something if you want to open them up so they're in the video. It'd probably
Hmm.
be
Perfect.
good. But like something like that, or here's a really cool little scene that I just saw on ArtStation the other day. I mean, these are all it's a highly detailed small little scene and then this hallway one, it's like a couple materials, but the lighting's nice. It clearly looks super realistic, and like I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like it clearly shows if someone wants to do like would want to work on something like Mirror's Edge or even like The Last of Us or something like they can clearly create realistic feeling spaces, and that
Hmm.
would lead me to looking further into their portfolio because if you're doing a massive scene, the quality might not be there. And the most important thing to me is like, is it a visually impressive image, right? And so this
Yeah.
is like, even though it's a hallway or a little corner like this, if you can do
Okay.
that to a high level of quality,
Yeah.
like this, to me, this is perfect. Like even without the scooter, that would be a great environment art portfolio, and it's totally manageable. And more importantly, something you can finish, which is going to give you the confidence boost and not only the confidence in your abilities, but also increase your self esteem because and your the way that you have that view of yourself because like yes, I finished things. So I would say that's so important is to stay small right in the beginning and actually finish things because
Mm.
that'll give you that momentum, and then you can tackle for your next scene maybe something bigger after that. But those are all great examples of just a little corner that looks just awesome, and it tells me everything I need to know about that artist's ability because it just looks great.
You've mentioned mindset a couple of times. Can you talk to me a little bit about confidence as an artist and what that means to you?
Yeah, like I mean, anytime you tackle a project, you're probably going to feel intimidated
Hmm.
right off the bat. It's probably going to be a mixture of excitement and intimidation, but probably because for a lot of students, they've never had to tackle something either as a different subject matter, like something maybe they've just been doing like grungy alleyways, and they're now want to try something sci-fi. So it's going to be exciting but intimidating, right? Um,
Sorry to interrupt. My daughter has a phrase for that her teacher taught her that I think the world needs to know. She calls it nervous-sided.
the nervous side. That's a perfect way of putting it. Because I
Excited
mean,
and
it's
nervous.
and the best thing about that is the nervous part means you're going to be learning things, which is
Hmm.
probably the whole point of doing an exercise in a project. Because when you're first learning, those projects aren't probably going to be the projects that get you a job, like to be completely honest. So I would focus more on learning and developing your abilities. And like if you can be satisfied with that for your first few projects, rather than being like, this has to be a portfolio piece, you're going to not beat up on yourself as much because you're going to be happy that you've learned some new things.
Yeah.
And that's like the biggest win of all. Like for me, anytime for those lighting things in my portfolio, it's like I wanted to boost my lighting skills to a higher level, right? I wanted to do it like an overcast Last of Us style scene. I was like, oh, how do I do that? So for me, it was more the end result. Yeah, it looks nice, notably because it was a scene I bought off the marketplace that already looked good. But like by focusing on learning the skills, that gave me the confidence boost in my lighting abilities, because I did all of those right before I got my job as being a dedicated lighting artist at WB. So I was like, I want to really beef up those lighting muscles, right? Because even after doing this for like 12 years, there's always that voice in the back of your mind being like, do you really know what you're doing? And some people call that imposter syndrome. So for me, I was still like, man, am I going to be able to like stack up against these badass like other 3 or 4 other lighters at WB that have been just doing lighting, focus on it full time for like the last 8 years or whatever. So there's even for me, there's like that little confidence voice in your head that's like, do you even know what you're doing? And I was like, I'm just going to do these exercises so I feel comfortable with the tools, because I knew the studio uses Unreal. I wanted to be comfortable with the entire lighting tool set and just really like pump those muscles. And I was like, hey, the end result is pretty good. I'll post it on ArtStation. But it was never my intention from the start to post it on ArtStation to get likes and like attention and stuff like that. I was just like, if it turns out great, that's good. If it turns out bad, no one's ever going to see it, and then I'll have maybe even questioning my ability even more. But no, I was like, by going through the process and just trusting in the process of like, it's going to take me a few revisions to figure out what I need to learn, what I need to improve, and just embrace that. Be like, I don't know everything, so I'm going to just dive in, get my hands dirty, and by doing that, actually getting started, your confidence will go up. Because it's sitting there and thinking about doing things is when a lot of the negativity will slip in. You're like, well, I could try this, but I don't know, it might suck, so I'm not even going to get started. But once you get started, you start to build that momentum. There's that famous image of like, it's like a sine wave where it's like, I love my art, I hate my art, I love my art, I hate my art. And then at the end of a project, you're like, yay, it's done, right? So it ends on an upward note, hopefully. But it's always like that. For every artist, it's like, I love it, I hate it, this sucks. Oh, actually, I see something promising here. I'm going to focus on improving that. Oh, wow, it's actually turning out cool. That's just part of the artistic process, to be honest. Like, and if it was smooth sailing right off the bat, it would be boring. It would be like data entry, like time to make some pipes, time to make some bricks. Like, I know it's going to turn out perfect, and I've done this 1,000 times. Like, that's when people end up getting burnt out. Like, I remember stories from people that used to be character artists at like EA Vancouver, and like, not to put them on blast or anything like that, but they're like, I literally sculpt hands all day, not even characters, just hands. And like, they're like, after a couple of years of doing that, they're like, I'm gonna go get a job at a studio where I'm creating full characters, because I need that sense of excitement and like doing things I'm not comfortable with. Like, the more you stay in your comfort zone, the more you'll eventually lose, I find. It's like, if you get super comfortable in a relationship and you kind of just stop caring, chances are that relationship isn't going to be great. If you're just stagnating and doing like, I'm totally comfortable drawing anime, and that's all I'm going to ever do, and I'm not going to attempt anything else because this is my comfort zone. Like, you're not going to grow as an artist. So if you're outside of your comfort zone, you're growing. Embrace that feeling of nervousness, and the more you do it, the more confidence you will have, because you'll be able to look back at all of your previous projects and be like, oh yeah, I finished that one, I finished that one, I finished that one. And it's just references, experiences that boost your confidence in the long run. So it's, like I said, it's like a muscle. The more you pump it, the more you can rely on it, and the easier it is to start your next project with more excitement and less nervousness.
Awesome. Thank you. I know I'm taking up a ton of your time, so thank you. I got 2 more questions for you.
No worries. Yeah, shoot.
Okay, so this comes from Edison, so we'll get a technical question. Edison's asking about UE for layered materials. Is layered materials used all the time on final assets for shipping the game? Because portfolio materials can be expensive. And he's looking at how to optimize and kind of match his portfolio with workflows.
With what is actually produced in the studios. Yeah. A lot of assets these days, yeah, they'll have like vertex blending on them. Like, a lot of modular pieces for structural meshes, like, will have like a metal with a blendable rust that you can just scatter on the surface, or like, bricks with, you can blend in water or concrete and stuff like that. some smaller props, you probably get away with like a non-layered material. Like looking at this image on screen, like those terracotta pots could probably just be a tiling flat terracotta texture on top of a very basic model. Like that's uh, probably a prop that I wouldn't spend too much time on doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's all about prioritizing and what you can get away with. That's what I always say is like, what can I get away with? Because a lot of the times you don't need to take the hero asset workflow for everything. So say I was creating like a watering can or a I don't know, like yeah, like say I was creating a watering can. I could probably just make a very basic watering can shaped model, throw like an aluminum tiling texture on it. That would probably be fine. If it needed to be slightly more quality, I could do an aluminum with a rust vertex blend on it. And then if it needed to be like the character, it was a first person game, and the character was going to pick it up. Then maybe I would give it a full high poly and like substance painter texture job. So
Mm-hmm.
it comes down to it. Also, if your boss comes to you and says you have half a day to do this watering can, well, that's going to impact how you make that mesh, right? Because a lot of times, good enough is good enough. Like I said, most people aren't paying attention to the tiny details, and you can use a couple basic tiling materials to really create a wide variety of props. Like I think Alien Isolation did that really, really well. A lot of their materials on almost all their assets were like basic tiling plastics, like with no added detail, and then they would add like deferred decals over on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
But in your portfolio, yeah, just figure out what's going to take you to invest the time. Invest your time on the things that are really going to wow people, and that's actually going to communicate to studios that you're also ready for the job too. Because if I look and see all of these little tiny hero assets, yeah, it's going to be impressive. But I'm like, how long did it take this person to do the scene? If we hire them and they get assigned like 3 or 4 assets to do, are they just going to go to their desk and start high poly modeling everything? I'm like, oh man, that's going to be a rude awakening for them when they're like, just slap a tiling wood texture on that like
Mm-hmm.
window frame, and they're like, what? We're not high poly and sculpting the entire window frame. So
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like invest your time in the wow stuff. And I usually like what I said in the past is like I'll do a very first pass on all my assets, put it in the engine, and be like, what stands out as looking terrible, and then do another pass on that, right? So like this Torii Gate, if you go back to the Japan scene, the Torii Gate, I did a high poly sculpt for, painted all the peeling wood and stuff in Substance Painter, the metal accents and stuff like that. So it's like, oh, it's going to be a big central part of the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Those floor bricks, it's literally just a tiling moss texture, like all the wonky floor tiles. It's like a super quick sculpted uh, brick block, and then just tiling stone and moss textures on top of that. So I was just like, how much of these going to be seen? Probably not the focus of the person that's looking at the scene's attention, right?
Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. Now the next question is, okay, I want to talk about proceduralism, and the kind of subtext here is that from my perspective, environment arts is probably one of the most dynamic areas in game arts right now. I mean, I'm sure somebody might see something else who's neck deep in the dev side of it. But environment arts is like, I mean, character arts was revolutionized with ZBrush.
Yeah.
Hasn't, I don't know much that's changed outside of some PBR and substance, but environments is like wildly changed with entire new jobs. Like surfacing artist is not a job they
Yeah,
hired
it's the
10 years
scope
ago.
of games has gotten so intense, right? Like every
Yeah.
generation, like it just gets more and more complex. Like one of the things I keep saying is right now, technical lighting artist isn't that big of a role, but next
Mm-hmm.
gen you're going to see that because the lighting and overall like rendering of the final image in a game is going to become on the level that like pretty much feature film has now. Like if you look at the Love, Death, and Robots, like some of those pre-rendered videos, like they look so amazing. So they had probably technical lighting artists being like, here's how you manage your exposure. Here's how the exact amount of lumens this light should be to look correct. Like nowadays, it's still pretty loosey-goosey with like a lot of lighting where it's like, add the lights, make sure they're a nice looking color and all that. But as the rendering improves, you need a lot more of the technical skills. So you're going to have more technically inclined artists and then more art artists that the technically inclined people are going to be like lassoing and trying to rein in. Be like, you have to use some like again the rules of the matrix, right? Play within the matrix at least a little bit, so we're not
Hmm.
the game's not running at like 4 frames a second. But I mean, tools are constantly evolving in terms of proceduralism, and at this point, like everyone's like, oh, are the tools, is AI going to take our job? And I'm like, no. Like, did texture artists go obsolete when Substance Painter came around? Like, no, it's just another tool that allows you to do your job more efficiently. And the more efficiently you can do your job, the less chances you're going to have of having to work crunch and like work insane hours, because uh, the scope of your work is probably going to be more focused in the long run, right? Like you're going to be more focused in on doing a smaller set of things that you really can work on. Because back in the day, like an environment artist on PS2 would do the lighting, they would do the texturing, they would build the entire, because you could build an entire PS2 level in a couple days. The geometry was so simple, right? So nowadays, people are just becoming more and more specialized, especially at large AAA studios. At smaller studios, people are going to need to be more generalist and still have a wider skill set, probably.
Hmm.
But even then, like even nowadays, like I know small studios that still have dedicated lighting artists now, because just in order to have that really appealing final image, you need someone that really knows what they're doing to complement the technical side of advancements in the industry.
It's interesting that you say it won't take the jobs because I agree. It didn't, Substance didn't. But the flip side of that is that some people didn't adapt.
Oh, absolutely. I saw that too. And every time there's a generation change, people leave the industry. It's either because they're tired of doing what they're doing and they don't want to
Hmm.
adapt, or they just get stuck in their ways, and then yeah, maybe they get fired. But like I remember when the generation jump between say PS2 and PS3, there was a lot of people that just refused to learn high poly modeling or how normal maps work. Normal maps worked. They were comfortable like hand painting all their textures, or you just not working with current technology. And they're like, no, I this is how I do it. And they're like, even up until recently, I would still see artists at some studios being like, I do all my textures in Photoshop because I just don't want to learn Substance. It's like, okay, well, everyone in the industry is going this way, and you're just like sitting there with your heels in the mud, being like, no, I'm not going down that path. Like, and it kind of shows that person's not willing to adapt, and they're probably, you know, not the best asset to have on a team if someone's like really stuck in their ways and everyone's being like, this is how we're doing it for this project, and that person's like, no, I'm using my workflow. I don't want to. I've been doing it like this for 10 years. I know best. It's like probably not the best setups for success.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, one last question. Guys, if you've got anything, make sure you get that out now. But I think I've gone through everybody's questions that's here with me live. Cerise says you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Fair enough.
Absolutely.
Um, this is a dilemma, or it's something that comes up a lot. So, in terms of your career, do you think it was luck or talent or hard work?
Probably mostly hard work. Just putting in the grind to develop my skills, and putting art out there for people to rip apart, and learning with every project that I've done. I mean, there is always that facet of luck for me getting my first job. Like I posted it. It was like this concrete, typical like Gears of War style concrete barrier, all shot up, sculpted in ZBrush. I posted it on like 5 different forums, and on I think it was CG Chat, which I very rarely went to. Someone saw it and sent me a DM being like, "Hey, I really like your work. We would be interested in bringing you in for an interview." And that's actually how I ended up getting my first job. And I made a video on that whole thing. It's on my YouTube channel. But so yeah, there is the luck of putting it out on 5 different forums and having the right person see it. But like the more you increase your output, chances are the better your luck will become. It's like that quote of like, it's funny, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And then especially nowadays with ArtStation, if you're a student and you start building your ArtStation following from day one, like just putting out work, slowly, you're going to slowly start to accumulate followers. When you're finally like 4 or 5 years down the road, posting all of your final graduation portfolio and stuff like that, uh, all of those people that have been following you for a while, all that engagement is going to drive your work up through the algorithm, and more people are going to see it. And the more eyeballs on your work, like it's just more swings at bat, right? So like if 10,000 people see your work and there's a say like a 1% conversion rate or something like that, which out of every 1,000 people that see your work, maybe you'll get like one job offer if your work is like and getting enough attention, right? So it's like attention plus exposure is like opportunity. So you can have all the attention on in the world, like from a few people on your art, but if it doesn't have a wide enough exposure to the general, internet, chances are your opportunities are going to be limited. So that's why having your work be at a really high level will get it the attention, and then using social platforms will give it the exposure, which will lead to opportunities. So it's kind of, that's like my formula for success nowadays, and it's having a long term view of building up your personal brand and audience on all those platforms. Like it's not going to happen overnight, so it's better to get started now because 6 years down the road, your future you will probably thank you.
I love that. That's I think that's like what you said right there is um there's a lot there. And one of the things that I think that's really important is that you're looking at it more from like I don't know if this is the accurate way to say that, but it's more of a business perspective, right? Like an artist will look and they'll be like, I got to be good enough. I got to work on X, Y, Z. A businessman knows
Yeah,
there's a market for anything. And what you need, if you're going to run a business, you need traffic and you need a conversion mechanism. And no matter what, you're going to get something. It's just
yeah,
you might want
and
more,
like the
but
higher quality your product, which is your skill set,
yeah,
uh, the more traffic and attention you'll get over time, right? Because
yeah.
people love to share things that are really inspiring, and that just increases the exposure. Like the whole internet has totally changed the game too, especially with things like ArtStation and Instagram. Like those didn't exist when I was first starting out. I was
Yeah.
just posting my work on random forums and hoping people would come by. And that's why I always tell people, please, for the love of God, use ArtStation for your portfolio because you're going to get so much organic traffic viewing your work that you don't even know about. While you're sleeping, people are looking at your work. Potential employers are looking at your work. If I had just like timsimpson.com and I had like a Wix portfolio, like the chances of people coming across that organically are pretty
Mm,
much nothing. And then when
yeah.
I would post a new artwork, no one would see it. So like I would have to actually spend all that time and effort to go to like 100 different forums, post my custom link to my custom website, and it would just eat up all of my time. So like by having these platforms where artists and hiring managers live, like Instagram, ArtStation, Behance, like put your work on there. So while you're sleeping, your work is literally giving you that like return on investment potentially. If you
Yeah.
really want to break it down to like a business type of mindset. But I mean, at the end of the day, you are a business. Your skills are going to give you an income to pay your bills, right? The skills pay the bills. That's the saying that everyone always says. So,
Skills pay the bills.
yep.
Michael's asking about the 6 years. Took you 6 years. Do you think it's common for one to spend this amount of time? And the subtext that I hear Michael asking is, "Oh my God, that's a long time."
This is scary. So for me, like I wouldn't say 6 years like pedal to the metal, like making
Yeah.
8 hours of art a day. Like I would literally do the work in class, which was like, I don't know, an hour and a half class, 3 or 4 times a week for the first couple of years. And then as my I think my last year of high school, I took two slots of that class. I somehow
Hmm.
managed to finagle that because I was like, I want to do this for half my day every day at school. So then it was like maybe 4 hours a day for a few times a week. But then really the last after I graduated, I was I think 17, and then from 17 to 19, I really ramped up my output. So I went
Hmm.
from working maybe like 20 hours a week on my artwork to up to 30. And then by the time I was 19, I was probably doing because I moved back home into my parents' basement. So I could focus on my art, and I was doing, like maybe like 40 hours a week of art,
Hmm.
uh, as consistently as I could. So I wouldn't say it's 6 years pedal to the metal. Like I think someone could become industry ready in 3, maybe 2 years if they're like a genius plugged into the matrix. But I mean, having that long term perspective on it, yeah, for most people, it's going to take them 3, 4, maybe 5 years, depending on the quality of their education. But again, I didn't have a lot of the resources that are out there now to shortcut my learning curve, right? So like, I literally just had access to. Well, I think Gnomon was big at the time. Like I could order
Hmm.
Gnomon DVDs and
Yeah.
or like books, and like YouTube didn't have a huge community or anything like that. So it's a trade off, right? Like the skills have gone up, and like the technical abilities you need to get into the industry have gone up, but also the resources to help you get there are like vastly improved, right? Like exactly like podcasts like this, like training courses that are out there, and
Hmm.
there's just so much more information. But it is going to take a few years of dedicated output to get your skills to that high level.
Awesome. Man, Tim, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for
Oh,
taking the
it's been
time.
great, man.
All
I
right,
really
guys.
appreciate having me on.
Yeah, you guys know where to find them. ArtStation/Pixel Masher, Tim Simpson. You can get to the About and you get to the Polygon Academy. There, you Google it, you'll find it.
Yeah, if you just search up Polygon Academy on YouTube, you'll find all the tutorials and videos. That's my main go-to spot. So
Awesome. All right, man. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate having me on.
Okay, take care.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys. All right. Cheers. All right. So I want to thank you so much for being here and taking the time to listen to this podcast. And I want to ask a couple of things from you. Number one, make sure you leave a comment or you rate this on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever that you're listening to this. It really makes a big difference in helping us get the word out and to help people understand what we do. The other thing is, I want to make sure that you know where to find us. Head over to www.vertexschool.com to learn about all the programs that we have for creatives. Our job at Vertex School is to teach you new skills in creative tech and help you get a job that matters to you. We lock in on the specific skills and triggers that people are looking for in the industry and what you need to do to prove that you can do this job. We're taking applications right now, so make sure that you head over to www.vertexschool.com and apply today. All right, again, thank you so much for being here. Have an amazing day.